it's a really good standout example of the globalization that's happening with things like the internet, that everything is almost immediately accessible, and you don't have to be in the same village to get the news or to find out things. So the whole world becomes a village.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host Paul Spain, and great to have Andy Patrick joining us from Argus Tracking. Welcome along, Andy. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good. Great to have you on the show for the first time.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking time out to join us as we head in towards Christmas. We're about a week away now.
Yeah.
Things starting to wind down for you and your team.
No, I don't think we ever stop, but we will wind down. We will take a bit of time off. So it'll be good.
Yeah. Oh, everyone's been working so hard across the tech sector.
Yes.
It doesn't seem as though we get much of a chance to unplug. So any excuse is a goodie. Now, for those who are listening in and wondering, who are you? Where do you fit into the tech world? Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so we're currently CEO of Argus Tracking. So we do GPS tracking for vehicles. Who, what and where are your vehicles? We cater for everyone from a one-man band like a courier or someone like that, all the way up to large government institutions or corporates. So a huge range of customers. So that's what I currently do. I've got about 10 or 15 years in the tech sector here in New Zealand with various startups and various companies. I think when I look back at my whole career, it has been startups, initially in larger corporates and things like that. But in new industries, I worked for a while in the UK for MTV. While I was there, I produced the first ever made-for-mobile television show.
Oh, wow.
So we shot a TV show just for mobile phones. So, things like that. First ever digital team for Disney. That had, obviously, the internet and websites, etc., but it was split amongst all the different divisions, so they made a specific online digital team, and I was a founding member of that. So, just all the way through. And so coming back to New Zealand, because all that was in the UK, coming back to New Zealand, attracted straight away to that software startup space, and have had some pretty great journeys and experiences in New Zealand building and helping build startups. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's always a crazy, exciting, fun, stressful, all of those things
all of the above.
Thrown in together. But never boring, that's for sure. Well, before we start, of course, a big thank you to our show partners, 1NZ, Spark, 2 Degrees, HP, and Gorilla Technology. Really want to thank them and acknowledge their support that keeps us going, keeps us on the electronic airwaves. Now let's start with sort of delving into some of the New Zealand topics before we sort of get into what's happening globally. It'll be going back, it must be in the direction of 2 months, where we just quietly shared some news about a little hyperscale data center that seemed to have got quietly switched on. Mm-hmm. That's Microsoft's first hyperscale data center in New Zealand, and I guess the first of the hyperscalers to really turn on their infrastructure in New Zealand. And well, I guess they've now made that formal. So I guess from their perspective, they've ticked the key boxes and they've aligned things with their PR teams and so on, and dates to do a big launch here. So that's just happened in the last few days. How important do you think this is for New Zealand that we're seeing Microsoft and of course also Microsoft's competitors following in their footsteps too? But it's Microsoft's week, I suppose, for this one.
Yes, yeah. I mean, obviously they're a massive company with data centers all around the world. So, and I think New Zealanders are pretty used to data sovereignty not sitting within New Zealand. Certainly, in when I've worked in other companies overseas, we've had to have the data local. So it gives New Zealand the opportunity to do that now. So that's obviously great for us. I've always likened New Zealand to being a doomsday bunker. If we get 2 giant bolt cutters, we can cut the internet cables and we can be quite self-sufficient. So maybe there's some data redundancy and storage that's going on there. I don't know. But obviously it's great for New Zealand, I think.
Yeah, look, I mean, super pleasing, and they've talked about how it's being powered by renewable energy. So good. I think good. Good to see that that support of renewables coming through, and I see that again there's some similar sort of patterns, I guess, with their competitors. But the coverage we've seen so far, and press releases and so on, shares a bit of that info. So, one thing from them was a $300 million commitment in 2022 to support the development of the Te Huka Unit 3, which was geothermal, power facility, and a 10-year commitment to renewable energy. So, look, I think, really exciting. We heard a bit about it from Vanessa Sorensen when she was in on the show earlier on in the year. So, congrats really to, Vanessa and the whole Microsoft team for pulling that one off. I know that was, something that took a bit of work to, twist some arms that this should happen in New Zealand. And, I think there were some of us certainly weren't expecting that this would necessarily happen at all until until the announcement came through. So I think very, very pleasing for us as a country. And as you say, if someone were to grab the bolt cutters and I know a bit of tongue in cheek there, but actually really good to know that key services would be able to operate if there were some challenges with the rest of the world. And in theory, there'd be a reasonable chunk of things that could tick along.
Yes. Well, I think too the renewables was pretty key. What we've seen over the last year around sort of rolling blackouts mooted, the fact that they've also incorporated that into their program is brilliant, because it means, it guarantees obviously the supply and keeping the centres up and running, but also it reduces the drain on the rest of New Zealand as well. And I think the more we see these things, it's going to get worse in New Zealand. Everyone's talking about it. So it is a big challenge for, I guess, the government to how do we, and obviously private organisations, how do we maintain power supply with the increases that we are putting on the grid.
That's right. Yeah, electric vehicles, data centres, all of these things put a load on the grid. So knowing that investment is there for the years ahead in appropriate capacity, and it's not just shuffling around some existing capacity.
Yeah, it's great.
Is really good. Now, talking of renewables and electric vehicles and so on, Fuller's have introduced what I think they're calling the world first hydrofoiling electric ferry. Mm-hmm. And look, the coverage makes it look pretty slick and pretty awesome. So I'm very curious about this. But there are some. I guess there are challenges in this sort of space to really make electric boats kind of work well because of the the drag. They're not necessarily very efficient. So this idea of going with a hydrofoiling electric boat, that seems actually pretty smart, brings some efficiency there. And I think we're waiting a little bit on these bigger 200 to 300 passenger electric ferries coming through. But this it's a little 10 passenger vehicle that's joined the fleet. The tickets on sale, $195 each. So it's a little bit hard to kind of get your head around how this fits together.
Are you going to pay $195 for a trip across the harbour?
Business
expense maybe.
Maybe.
But
it's obviously there as a bit of a piece to to attract attention and look, I think it is really important that when it comes to new technologies and innovations that we do find ways of getting started, even for things that might be a long way off what the end game is. And so look, good on them.
Don't get me wrong, I think it's awesome. I think the challenge is how do you turn it into a mass market event. So they said it was cost about $8 to charge it. So again, that's pretty cheap if you compare it to diesel. So that side of it works, but how do we get the general public on it and using it? And that's a big challenge that I don't envy having to figure out.
Yeah.
Does it get rid of seasickness? That's one question for me. But
Well, I mean, I think there is something to be said for the hydrofoils in those regards.
I was impressed that it managed 1 metre seas. That's fairly decent. So the clearance, I can't imagine the clearance of the boat is much higher. So the fact that it can stay foiling at 1 metre is, that's great.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, the $8 in charging, I didn't actually get my head around that unless they've got a really impressive price that they buy power at. I'm guessing. So this was during the trial. Yeah, they said, or the Herald said they were told that return Auckland CBD to Waiheke trip cost $8 in charging. My guess is that would be per person. That'd be my guess on a journey like that.
Yeah,
I'm sort of doing, and I'm not really doing all the numbers in my head, but I'm just thinking through, and it's like that must be per person on board. Surely I can't see any other way they would they would achieve that. But anyway, if it's costing that per person, and they can charge a couple of $100, then
you've got the time component.
There's something there to go back towards their initial investment.
Yes, and you've got the time component too. It'll probably take half the time to get over there as well. So if you're someone who values your time in that way, you can zip into town, be in the office, zip back again. Yeah. Yeah,
that sounds pretty cool. So I'm hopeful of a chance to try that out at some stage. But long may these sort of innovations continue. I think they're talking about scaling up to a 100 passenger variation in the future. So that sounds pretty cool. Now, I saw an interesting headline. I get pinged a whole lot of things when it comes to, the role of technology in society and the good and the bad. And I was recently on the Coromandel, so I saw this headline come up around Cook's Beach. They're apparently fundraising for security cameras. And I find this interesting. Yeah, it is. It's now the sort of thing that's actually reasonably cost effective to be putting in cameras and surveillance into communities. I think they had surveyed their population there, and they found residents were 80% in support of CCTV cameras along the roads and in and out of the village. So there is quite a leaning towards more surveillance. You can see why from a safety perspective, and if people are getting their homes and holiday patches kind of burgled, then this helps become part of the deterrent. But of course, as we do that, we get into a society that's, I guess, like some other parts of the world where there's an insane amount of cameras and surveillance. You do have the potential for untoward uses of some of that technology. So there's a bit of a balancing act here. Yeah,
it's I always find it quite an interesting dichotomy, if you like. It's the lesser evil for the greater good. Yeah. Like, do you set up your society for the 1% bad and sort of punish, in inverted commas, the 99% good? So I think as you've mentioned, that there's some clear targeting going on of empty houses, etc. It's a well-known holiday spot. Houses are often empty for large portions of the year. So I think that's the thinking, is that if they just monitor the one road in and out, they can narrow that down. So at least they're not, well, again, I don't know 100%, but it doesn't sound like they want to put CCTV all over the place. It's really in just those main thoroughfares where they can catch the people. Because again, it seems to be people coming from out of town, if you like. Not generally local. So good on them. I think too, the page says they're a little bit short of cash at the moment too. So if you've got $1 and you like that area, chuck it their way. Good on them for being proactive.
Now, one of the things we've talked about briefly in the past is this new bill that was coming through, the Fair News Digital Bargaining Bill, and there sort of seemed to be some interesting perspectives. Some saying, well, hold on, we've got Facebook and Google and the like, really taking advantage of our our local media, and that they should basically pay money to link to stories. And my maybe naive kind of view on it is that actually news sites get a lot of traffic off the likes of Google and Facebook and so on. Yes, people in some cases will just read the headlines and will stay completely on those platforms, but certainly in a lot of cases, people will actually click through to the content. So it would be very interesting if all of these platforms just said, no, we're not going to link to any online news anymore. Like, would you go to those platforms unless that's part of your daily habit? And I've certainly had times where part of my daily habit is going through various news sites and sort of checking out the news. Other times you kind of get busy. It's like you maybe don't visit the same sources as much, and so those incoming links from varying directions can certainly help generate a fair chunk of traffic. But it is the bill has been officially put on hold, and this is interesting timing. So according to Paul Goldsmith's office, that the legislation is on hold, but it comes as Australia are announcing that they're going to create new rules, I guess aimed at sort of strong arming the platforms, Meta's and Google's. So I think it's going to be quite fascinating to see how it plays out. The last I read on that side were the media partnerships that I think it was Meta I was reading about, that they had negotiated in the last few years, that basically they were going to end those partnerships and not continue paying. And so this is where the Australian government is looking to put new legislation in place to ensure that the likes of Google and Meta helping to fund Australian journalism, it looks like in the form of tax. So it's going to be interesting just to see how that stuff plays out. Some of these things, it can be really good for a smaller country like New Zealand to be at the forefront and innovative in terms of how we do things. And in other cases, we probably just get ignored. And I think that this could well be one of those situations where New Zealand probably benefits a little bit from seeing what works and what doesn't work in Australia and other markets. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean the genie's been out of the bottle for 25 years. Yeah. Think about it. When news first started using the internet, if you had to pay for news, you would be perfectly happy doing that now. Yeah. Because that's what you've been conditioned to do for 20, 25 years. Yeah. So they're trying to sort of unwind the clock a bit. And I think too it's a really good standout example of the globalization that's happening with things like the internet, that everything is almost immediately accessible, and you don't have to be in the same village to get the news or to find out things. So the whole world becomes the village. So would you stop your neighbour accessing things? Probably not. But because they're a foreign company or a big nameless corporation, then yes. But I don't know. It's probably above my pay grade, but I'm happy getting news as it is. I think too, news organisations are bringing in paywalls and things like that. So there are sort of ways around it. But Aussie are definitely more litigious than us. Much more, here's a rule, than New Zealand. Kiwis don't tend to like rules in the same way that Aussies do. So it's a different environment. So it'll be interesting to see how our parliament tweaks whatever happens in places like Australia and Canada and US. Yeah.
Now, also on a somewhat local front, interesting post from Nick Mowbray in the last 24 hours or so. He's co-founder at ZURU, and we know them as a toy company, but ZURU have kind of multiple brands now, including ZURU Tech. And Nick was sharing a video on really where they're heading from a tech perspective, and they've been working on this for quite a number of years. And they refer to it actually one place in their video as the factory of the future. Now that's just kind of one portion of what they're doing, but the idea is using AI, using technology to be able to design homes, and then I guess in something of a reflection of what they've done with toys, where they've built out massive, super modern factories in China for making toys and selling them to the world, where they would take an innovative and forward-thinking approach to building homes. And quite fascinating just to see a little bit of a refresh. This is something that's been mooted for a number of years now, and I know they've had a chunk of people working on this behind the scenes. But look, I'm really curious how it plays out. And when you look at the videos they're sharing, these are not necessarily the low end budget, build a home for the homeless end of the market.
Yes.
Now, possibly this is a a Tesla type approach. Start with something kind of super cool, and then work your way through to where it can be really mass market, or maybe it's something that this is actually designed to really focus on those those high end bespoke homes where you can use design tools and so on to I guess to supplant the sort of work that would normally be done locally by very expensive processes in terms of architecture and building, and then try and deliver something of a bespoke result, but that's being manufactured in a much more and designed in a much more efficient way.
Yes, Kiwis are interesting like this too. We want to be individuals. So how do you get that across to our market? We're much less inclined to be wanting to live in the same house as the guy next door or the girl next door. So it can only be good. And I think obviously they've got a huge history, like you said, of building manufacturing plants and understanding how to build, mass production. So I think it'd be awesome, but it'd be good. The proof's going to be in the pudding, isn't it? It's going to take them a while to get it right, but it'd be great to see it. I think if it makes housing more affordable, who's going to be against that approach? So
well, Nick's comment was that the key is the cost, which he's saying is a small fraction of what it costs to build today. So look, I think this has been one of the areas I've been excited about is the potential, for us to address some of the big challenges we have in society, and if we can bring down the cost of building, then that makes it much more accessible for many more Kiwi families to to own their own homes, which has sadly have become much harder over recent decades. So really interesting. The other thing you mentioned, the full-size commercial factory, 25 acres, currently under development, and shipping test houses next year. So if you want to get on the beta testing list and order one of their first homes, it could be a bit of a risk. But I imagine if they're going through the process, they're going to make sure these things are up to snuff, right?
Yes.
So
you only get one shot.
Pretty exciting. Yeah, that's right. You got to do it pretty well. But I can imagine there might be some parallels with Tesla. You get a pretty good product out there, and then you kind of keep working on it and keep iterating, and lots of companies. It'll be really interesting to follow this one up and see what more we can hear from Nick and the ZURU team in 2025.
I'd just love to see how they're manufacturing it. It'd be fascinating to have a look inside there.
Yeah, they've got
acres.
some video online on Nick's LinkedIn post, but they're joining up lots of dots. They're showing off sort of home automation and lots and lots of I guess pieces of technology, sort of autonomous trucks moving things around a factory, and it does in some ways look like a large scale toy factory, but instead of the usual kind of conveyor belts and stuff, you got trucks moving around and
life size toys.
Yeah. And I think they were working on maybe a quarter scale prototype factory. So and they've got their own software they call Dreamcatcher, which is part of how the design takes place.
So a quarter scale was 25 acres? Or is 25 acres the full thing?
Man, I think that's their full-size commercial factory.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big building.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, no, very. This will be a very interesting one to follow, and it'll be fantastic. If they can pull off all the things that they're imagining. But
yes.
I think the Mowbray family have been pretty successful to date. So this could well be their biggest deal yet.
Yeah.
Now, just on the international front, lots and lots of things going on. As always, drone detection system apparently being deployed. A new technology in New York, because they've been having a few dramas with drones over recent days. Seems to be kind of big news all around the planet that there's a few drones up in the air above New Jersey and New York. Do you think this whole thing's sort of blown out of proportion? Because I don't know. I mean, they're off talking to Trump and getting his thoughts, and he's saying, "Oh, the government knows exactly, what it is," and who knows? But no one seems to have any clarity that there's kind of any issue. It's just people keep looking up and seeing drones and then filming them and sharing them online,
which has probably been happening for the last 20 years. It's interesting that it's only in New Jersey, not any other state. Yeah. And I don't know. I think probably once they dig into it a bit deeper, it might be a little less nefarious than they think. But it gives a politician 10 minutes, and on CNN to push their election campaign for next year. But I don't really know how to respond to that. I mean, fortunately, we're not seeing any big dramas at this point, other than the sort of media dramas. So let's hope it stays that way. GM, they have been running a division called Cruise, doing robotaxi developments in the US, and those have even been on the streets around San Francisco and so on. But they've pulled the plug on things, and the Cruise kind of capability they've been building for their own vehicles to compete with what other automakers have been doing. Those cruise capabilities, they're bringing that stuff in-house. So, quite interesting to see that. They're saying that, their plan, instead of going down that track of the autonomous robo-taxis, is to realign their autonomous driving strategy to focus really on advanced driver assistance systems and autonomous systems for use in personal vehicles, which, is interesting. And even before they put the autonomous, they're leading with advanced driver assistance, technologies. They've thrown over $10 billion, into their robotaxi, that robotaxi entity. So it's not a small investment that they're saying goodbye to here. But even that note that it's focused on advanced driver assistance suggests we're maybe further away on this than some would have us believe. Put it that way. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, GM make cars. That's what they are really good at, manufacturing. So that when they bought Cruise, I think 2016, they essentially decided they wanted to run a taxi company, which is not their area of expertise. So I think really what they're saying now is we're giving up on running taxis and being in the business of running a pickup and delivery fleet to bringing all of that tech into our own vehicles and just focusing it there. So I think it's that. I think is it Mary, who's the CEO, strayed from their core business a little bit, and now they're pulling it back in and actually going, well, let's stay. And like you say, they're pulling it back from fully autonomous to driver assisted. And again, that's going back to their roots. Where should we start this conversation, and how does it benefit GM and make GM vehicles better than they are today? And also, like you say, competing with some of the others that are out there. I think Waymo is probably leaps and bounds ahead of them. I mean, they had an accident about a year ago the GM or the Cruise did, and
That's right,
that put
yeah.
them back. You know, they pulled all the cars off the road and tried to sort it all out, whereas Waymo hasn't had a similar thing, so they're so going from strength to strength. So again, they've recognised that they're losing position in the market, so maybe we should refocus and take that $10 billion and put it into earning that money back.
Yeah, well, they were spending, I think, $2 billion US a year, so that was never going to stop until they solved it. And
what could you do with that?
They
sort of
obviously
money?
didn't have the confidence they could solve it.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah.
You could do a fair bit, and I guess the reality is for a company like GM that is not a trivial kind of amount at all. There, I'm just looking up their
cap,
market cap, $57.4 billion US dollars today. So to be putting kind of a chunk of that sort of size in there is yeah.
And the share market, the share price rose to 2.3% or something the day that they announced that they were doing this. So clearly the investment market thinks it's a good idea as well. So
yeah. So interesting, the founder of Cruise, original founder, who left a bit over a year ago.
Yeah, just after that accident.
Yeah. So I think at that point there must have been a falling out, and they thought, we've got to take a different approach. Yeah. And I guess at that point they kept spending, so they spent another $2 billion from that point. But yeah, he was posting on X saying, in case it was unclear before, it is clear now. GM are a bunch of dummies.
Yeah.
So there's no love lost. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he obviously didn't leave on good terms. You could probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, that transitioning from founder to that sort of high growth mode is very difficult. Not many founders do it or can do it. And so, maybe that was part of the conversation as well. But yeah, I think probably keep an eye on him, and he'll come up with his next thing shortly in a similar vein and look to build it again. So good on him.
And some of the coverage there was mentioned, around who else is doing this stuff. You mentioned Waymo before. Tesla are trying to get there. And in one of our earlier episodes in the last month or two, I spoke about my experience with some of the Tesla sort of semi-autonomous technology getting around San Francisco and also trying out the Waymo vehicle. Really, really, interesting stuff there. So if you haven't heard that episode, worth jumping back and having a listen. But also mentioned is Wave. Now, Wave is the company co-founded by Alex Kendall, who's a Kiwi. So, they're called out as one that, and they are now testing in San Francisco. They're funded by SoftBank, so lots of money for them to lean in on. And there's also Zoox, which Amazon are behind in the US market, and of course there's a whole lot going on in China as well. So I think we'll continue to see movement here, but it's still pretty hard to know exactly how it's all going to land and where we'll be at in sort of 10 years, but you kind of expect that they've sort of solved most of the problems by then, but whether they will solve them over the next 12 to 24, I guess from GM's perspective, they decided that they probably weren't going to, because they had Honda lined up to start a robotaxi
they invested.
Service, right? Yeah. So they were going to I guess do that in the Japanese market. And of course that's all off now. So
I can imagine the Wave guys were high-fiving. Like, if you found out that one of your biggest competitors suddenly exited the market, that's the best news I've got all year.
Or is it telling you that actually you're trying to do something that's impossible that you'll never solve? But I don't know. I think Alex Kendall and the Wave crew are onto something pretty solid there from the demos. But having tried some of these things myself, I know they're not. The reality is sometimes slightly different from the demos. So we'll see. Now, one more topic sort of I wanted to tap into. We talked about sort of surveillance cameras there. Coromandel saw a headline that they're looking to target drink and drugged drivers in a world first trial in the UK, Devon and Cornwall. So where basically the AI will be looking to identify impaired driving behaviour and can then, I guess, alert the authorities. So this is interesting because we have had such ongoing challenges, with in New Zealand and I think probably around the world with road toll, being quite closely linked to sort of drink driving and so on. So I'm sure there will be quite a big interest in can this kind of change the picture?
Yeah, I'd love to understand how the AI figures out that you are potentially under the influence. I imagine it watches how you drive, if you veer more than you are expected. I like too that it can take photos without blur up to 300 kilometres an hour. So, if you've
pretty fast camera, isn't it?
Yeah, if you've ever been to Cornwall or Devon, the roads are quite small and quite country.
Yeah,
so
of course.
There's no way you're going to be going 300k. So
no, so it's
so
well above spec.
Well above spec. So yeah, and I liked how it said that you'd be unaware that you were being tracked or being monitored. But I don't know if you've seen the picture of the unit. It's quite a massive unit with massive high vis all around it.
Yeah.
So you'll definitely see it, but maybe by then it'll be too late.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously anything like this that we can do to keep us all safe is a great move as well. And I mean, I don't think necessarily the visual sensing is that new. And 2 or 3 years ago, I was looking at construction sites picking up humans not wearing hard hats, things like that. So it's been around for a while.
Yep.
This is obviously just a really specific niche target and use case, which is are going to be better for the rest of us who don't drink and drive.
Yeah, look, I think we've seen machine learning be used to kind of recognise and say an X-ray or some sort of medical record, being able to look at data and pick up to a reasonably high accuracy that there could be an issue. So yeah, it would seem to make some sense that there probably are some uniques to how people drive when they're under the influence of a of something, and and so look, if they can pick that up, I think there would be quite a big interest in it. So just I guess becomes another reason for more cameras down the street. Maybe they can come to some sort of efficiency on these things, but yeah, there'll certainly be some concerns as we keep coming up with more and more excuses to put surveillance everywhere as well. But this seems like certainly something that could save a chunk of lives.
Yeah.
Now, there are a few other topics that I was potentially going to delve into, but I think it'd be good to actually hear probably a little bit about what you're doing, and we'll see if we get a little bit of further time at the end, Andy. But keen to hear a little bit about Argus tracking and what you guys are doing out there, and what are the sort of use cases that you're seeing? How a business is really leaning into GPS sort of in their fleets and in their vehicles. How's that helping?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's as I sort of said earlier that we've got smaller SMBs all the way up to big corporate, so the use case is very different. If you look at that sort of entry point or the initial reason for GPS for the smaller organisations, often it's around theft.
Yep.
So that's vehicle theft, but also time theft. My drivers, my team are meant to be on site or meant to be here, and they're not. And so how do I make sure that they are? And people also use it. Lots of trade sort of companies use it for invoicing. So we know the vehicle is at your place doing the job for this amount of time, so I can hook that directly into my invoicing and my pay systems, and so therefore you can get that pretty clearly. So there's those sorts of ones, and then you go all the way up to the government organisations and corporates, which are a lot more around sustainability, a lot more around sort of carbon monitoring. So we do all those sorts of things. We've got all of the standard stats for every vehicle, the carbon output, the fuel usage, all those sorts of things, and we can calculate exact carbon usage from the miles that you do and the engine revving and things like that.
Yep.
So there's that sort of piece. Also, we're having some really good conversations with particularly government organisations at the moment around fleet reduction.
Yeah,
And the vision of Argus is around creating intelligence to elevate people, performance, and planet. And so that planet bit is quite key to us. It's a negative for us as an organisation to lose revenue, but from achieving that part of our vision, we're quite happy with it. It's taking another car off the road, and providing that the car is coming off the road for a positive reason, not I've made my entire team redundant and we don't need the cars anymore, but rather we've recognised we've got 3 cars, we only need 2. So there's lots of work that we do with people around that and help show that sort of utilisation, productivity piece.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit about that, recent times, and it, it does seem as though, technology can have a really, really big place to play when it does come to the efficiency and understanding sort of the detailed utilisation of a fleet and being able to make much better and smarter decisions.
Yes. Yeah, and the other big piece is around sort of driver behaviour. So we're very careful to say, look, we don't monitor drivers, we monitor cars and vehicles. So we don't necessarily care who's driving it. We can just tell you what the vehicle did or is doing. But it's around building a positive driver culture around, maintaining speed limits, things like that, and driving in a safe manner. We've got some companies that, on average, we're getting 2 speeding infringements a month with their fleet, and then once Argus was installed, they halved that and less. So again, that's drivers that are used to exceeding the speed limit, potentially being a bit dangerous, and now they're being pulled back and saying, "No, come on, guys, let's do the right thing here." So there's lots of examples like that we have and use. And again, it's about safety for individuals and for other road users. So those are kind of, I guess, some of the big pieces that we work with. We've got a couple of really good partners as well in the space that work with us around that sustainability and that utilisation, fleet reduction, and also that transition to EV. So we can look at your fleet. We can tell you you've got 50 vehicles, but 20 of them never go more than 400k in a day.
Yep.
Therefore, there is a likelihood that you could convert those 20 into e-vehicles. So it's information like that we can provide at a really granular level that was maybe more anecdotal for companies in the past.
Yep.
And so we can, again, help them with their EV journey. I mean, you would have seen, obviously, the news this year about how EV sales are dropping and all the rest of it.
Well, I've seen I've seen just in the last few weeks, it's sort of flipping internationally.
Yes.
And I mean, the latest headline I saw was around Australia sort of doubling in terms of the uptake of EVs. But of course, it just said in recent times. So I was like, I was looking for a bit more data. Like, did it double in this year, the last 5 years, the last 10 years? Because of course we know these things have sort of ticked up. But it does seem as though things are sort of are increasing again to at least some degree. But of course we had a big impact here in New Zealand with subsidies disappearing.
Yes.
And of course, that was always going to take the wind out of the sales of the EV sales for a period, right?
It totally did. And I think what we're seeing now is overstock of the market.
Yeah.
So which is bringing prices down. So then people are jumping back in and buying them. So I don't know how long that's going to last. I suspect that the manufacturing organisations are starting to reduce. I mean, well, we know they have, Tesla, for example, reduced their output to keep demand high and meaning they can maintain prices. So there's a little bit of that market dynamics piece going on. I think the other thing too in New Zealand, but also wider parts of the world, obviously with a recession type attitude going on, whether or not it's been an actual recession is up for debate. But everyone's been tightening their belt. So lots of people haven't purchased new vehicles this year. They have extended the life of their current fleet.
Yep.
And so some of those might be starting to get to the point where actually we do need to replace these now. So you'll see a little bit of uptick there. And the other thing too, though, is it means that the used car market, the used car manufacturing plant has dried up this year because those vehicles are not coming into the market anymore. So used price for cars are going up because there's less, the demand is there, but there's less supply. So there's a whole lot of dynamics sort of going on as well. And we've seen a lot of fleet reduction. We've seen a lot of companies merging, liquidations, things like that this year more than we ever have. And we've seen a big change in buying patterns as well. 75% would buy our GPS devices outright last year and preceding years. This year it's more like 50-50. So we run a sort of an OPEX rental model, sort of where you just, you pay a smaller amount each month, and given the economic climate that we're in, that cash flow, maintaining that cash flow is key for survival, and so lots of companies are opting for those sorts of options. And so we've come up this year with 2 or 3 different pricing mechanisms to help our customers and potential customers to get GPS and then reap the benefits of that within their organisation, and to help them do that. So it's been a really interesting, challenging year from that perspective. Yeah.
And, in terms of, we've got people listening in that are kind of curious, like, what does it cost to, to get up and running? Is there a lot of kind of integration you have to do sort of software-wise into people's existing systems, or will they often just use your software, entirely and just be able to jump in for a fairly minimal kind of cost?
Yes is the short answer. I mean, we've got there's a company called Fleetwise that do pool booking. So we have got really deep integration with them. So if you have that as your pool booking, Argus works seamlessly with that, and there's a couple of others as well that we work with. So from that sort of perspective, it's a little black box. We drop it in your car. It takes anything from 15 minutes to an hour, depending on the device and in the car and things like that. And then the software's up and running straight away, and you're off and running. So it can generally, what slows down the installations, the onboarding, is organising the vehicles to be in a location to fit the devices. So I mean, we can fit big fleets very, very quickly, but there's a big sort of project management organisational piece that needs to happen with our customers often, and we help them with that. We've done it, I don't know, hundreds of times. So we're pretty good at helping customers do that. So you can get up and running and seeing benefits quite quickly. We've had someone, say around August, come on board within sort of 30-60 days, sort of started seeing driver behaviour improving, people not hitting excessive speeds, things like that. That then there's a knock on as well to fuel efficiency, because as you know, if you drive a car more smoothly but also a little bit slower, you save on fuel, things like that. So they started seeing cost savings immediately. And the other one is quite big, is around e-rucks and rucks, the road user charges. So we've got a couple of systems which manage and monitor that. So quite a few organisations will be off-road driving their diesels, and so obviously we can give you that down to the meter, so you can then come back and claim back those diesel miles is one piece. And then the other one is actually for a big fleet is we can manage that whole setup for you. So now you don't need 1 or 2 people all day, every day, just getting registrations or rucks and putting them into cars or giving them out to drivers to put into cars. We can automate all of that, digitise it.
Wow,
so those people can go from doing a fairly mundane job to actually value add within their organisation, and actually start to look at ways to improve their efficiencies and their productivity, as opposed to doing this. It's obviously a necessary and a compulsory task in New Zealand, but I just think that there's you could spend your time better and benefit your company organisation more by doing more value add type work.
Yeah, really interesting. Well, I hope that you get a good break, and that things will keep moving forward for you in 2025.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
it's been great to chat with you, Andy, on the show.
Yes, thank you.
Anything else you want to mention that we should have covered?
We've got a few things coming out next year, which could be quite interesting. Yeah. Video, we're looking at AI, as I think most people should be. One of our big initiatives this year was growing outside of our traditional base. So we've got a few things in that area coming next year. So our traditional base being light commercial vehicles. Yeah. So we've got a few things bubbling away in other areas. So watch this space. Is probably
that's exciting. And
it is. It's really good.
And where do people track you down if they're interested in finding out a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I mean, argustracking.com is our company website. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Yep. And then I've also, if you're a SaaS person and in startup world, I do have a little blog that I've been chipping away at, just called Andy P Black Ops. Yep. So have a look at that if it's sort of 2 to 5 minute reads and little bits of advice about things I've learned over the last 10 years in SaaS. So if you're in that sort of early startup space, you may find some useful tips in there for everything from operational things through to people and capabilities and engineering, etc.
Yeah. Oh, that's very good. Well, good stuff. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Now, I should mention, although this is our last live kind of episode before Christmas, we actually do have some pre-recorded episodes, so there will be some content there to keep you occupied over the break. We'll be back early mid-Jan with more of the sort of live episodes. If you aren't catching the live episodes, then definitely make sure you're following us on the varying channels. You can follow myself, Paul Spain, on LinkedIn for our LinkedIn live streams, but we're also across on YouTube, Facebook, and X for the live streams as well. And these days you can also catch us on YouTube Music as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you're looking out for just the audio side. Of course, a big thank you to our show partners, to 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, 1NZ, and Gorilla Technology, and we'll look forward to catching up in 2025. And if you've got any recommendations on content or topics or suggestions for 2025, we may be mixing things up a bit. So keen to hear any suggestions. Feel free to get in touch via the NZ Tech Podcast website. All right, haere rā, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Cheers.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.